Okay, we're ready. It's officially time. All right, now normally I always start this out with either being aggressive about your cell phones or shaming you about your cell phones. So today I'm going to start out in a completely different manner and take a minute to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart that donated to Tiger Giving Day for Ollie. We did hit our goal. That was greatly appreciated, and I guarantee you that we will spend that money to enhance your experience here at Ollie. So thank you again from the bottom of my heart. Now turn off your phones. Okay, Wisdom Wednesday tomorrow. And that will be the journey and responsibility of historic personal poetry, writing poems about Helen Keller's adult life with Jeannie Thompson. Sounds like a great event. Certainly, having been to see Helen Keller's house, I won't try to do any, poetry like there once was a young lady from Florence. We won't go down that road. Anyway, Ollie logo voting. So we're going to have a new Ollie logo, and that's because the university had a contest, I guess, for the students. I'm not sure why, but anyway, you can vote for the new logo. I personally voted for one of them. I won't say which one. And that is at Sunny Slope, and that is this week only. There are 4 logos to choose from, so please, if you're over at Sunny Slope, take a minute and pick one. I think some of them are very attractive. I think the students did a really nice job. Ollie Game Night coming up Thursday. Should be a lot of fun. Again, we're going to have Ursula providing light refreshments. And, of course, you have to bring your own beverage. We've already been down this road, so hard liquor would be recommended by me, but, So, okay. Today, our lecture will be about the Crusades. And the Crusades were a time of expansion of Christian Europe. And it was primarily done by young knights, and they had 3 main goals. The first goal, eternal life. They wanted to be one with the church. The second goal, land. And the third goal, gold. Well, I don't know if they were necessarily in that order, but that's indeed what they were trying to accomplish. So today, it is my pleasure to introduce Ollie's own Crusader of History. A man who is also perhaps seeking eternal life, but judging by the fact that he's teaching for Ollie, I'm sure there will be no gold involved. So, I present to you Sir Joseph, the History-Hearted.
The fertility of your mind is just always amazing, yes. The plants. Yes, here we are in the crusading period, and among the accomplishments, in quotation marks, of Western medieval civilization, this might well be considered the most well-known. And as we study it, we always remember there are many films and books that recount various aspects of it, which are not necessarily true, and in fact sometimes maybe exaggerate certain aspects of it. This is going to be merely an attempt to look at some aspects of what I'm calling the 4 Crusades. There are others. In fact, it's like some crusades even have numbers according to some, but I don't give them credit. I just give credit for 4, but there are others that are called crusades, but we'll let that go because these are the biggies. These are the ones that if you were to go to a medieval convention, poor soul, and you hang out during the social hour, and you know, it's like everybody says, oh, 4, oh yeah, you know, it's like that's something everybody knows. But if you said 5, 6, or 7, I think a lot of people would look at you and shrug. They don't have the sort of fame that the first 4 do. I like this map because I thought it showed the various routes overland and on the Mediterranean that Crusaders took. And from the start, as Frank pointed out, it is about eternal life and taking up the cross. That's what crusade means. And as we go to origins and factors, we always start with the idea that by this time period, people are conscious of their religion and the concept, presumably, of if you're not one of us, then you are an enemy. This, of course, goes way, way back. Some of you have heard me speak of a book called The Western Views of Islam in the Middle Ages, how it evolved over time and how they began to think of Muhammad as a losing papal candidate. And you know how that hurt, yeah. And they thought he didn't get to be pope, and you know, sort of like, I'm going to take my toys home and I'll start my own religion. And because they could not imagine someone being that successful and not being one of us. So obviously he's a loser, a big loser. And what do we do to lose him? Well, we hurt him. And so we get that idea, and it goes back and evolves over time, as we know, from Charlemagne's activities in Spain. Many could view that as sort of a, what you call a pre-crusade, sort of getting ready, the semis. We are sort of building our strength and getting more sense of who we are and what we're capable of doing. Obviously, it was not anything on the level of where we are going, but it is to make us aware that there was interest in fighting what I would call the other. Now, we never forget about the enemies in the East. And you say, oh, not the Byzantines. Oh, we'll get to them. But right now, I'm talking Slavs, because we need to fight them too. And you say, why? Because they've got the land that we want. They got more land, and they're pagans. So 2 strikes, and we fight them. Charlemagne, you'll remember, was all behind this. And this became part of his campaign. I mean, Charlemagne is, to me, the epitome of the crusader, the individual who's fighting. You say, well, why would Christians fight anyway? I thought they followed the Prince of Peace. Oh, I thought you'd never ask. Well, I built that one up. It's because, of course, Jesus wants us all to do our roles. And their role is to fight. Okay, yeah. And so we're fighting for Jesus. And so we all have our different functions. We're Germanic people. We can't just renounce it. And so we'll fight them. Now, you crowd, you preach, you can work on conversion. And that is the idea, the assigned role that different members of the Christian community have. And that will be the way these Western Christians see it. So it would seem to me. But there is also the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims go way, way back, as you know. Some of you will remember Constantine's mother. Constantine's mother was quite a character. Saint Helena, as she is known, who, according to legend, tradition, found the true cross. Whether or not she did, she was certainly important to him. And she was an example of an early pilgrim going to the Holy Land and treating this as part and parcel of the Christian duty. Now, it's not like a Muslim going to Mecca exactly, but it's considered a highly beneficial activity for the Christian pilgrim. And you go to Rome, that's nice. But to go all the way to the Holy Land is even better. So that's part of the issue, and they saying that by the late 11th century, these Westerners were no longer safe and secure in traveling to these holy places. So, they'd been going for centuries, interestingly. So, we have that, security of pilgrimage. We have the hatred of the Muslim, and lest we forget, and I know you won't, Gregory VII and Henry IV. Henry IV, may he be cursed, was the one who was hostile to the blessed Gregory VII. And if they had been together in a loving father-son relationship, Gregory could have said, "Oh, Dad, you're such a wonderful pope." I'm making this up as I go. You're such a wonderful pope. What can I do? How can I make you happy just to show you what a great pope you are? Well, maybe you could go out east and kick some Muslim around. Well, that didn't happen. The crusade, though, is part of the papal manipulation of this situation to show this so-called emperor, a.k.a. German king, who's important, and it isn't you. 9, it is the Pope, and you're a big old loser. I mean, those are harsh words, but I mean, if he's damning his soul, I don't think I'm being too harsh. I think it was pretty bad in that struggle. Now we go to the Seljuk Turks. These are the predecessors of the current Turks. So they're kissing cousins, as we say in the South. Ottoman Turks. But these are Seljuk Turks. They are converts to Islam, and you know what they say about those converts. They got enthusiasm. Yeah, they are cheering. They are really fired up, and the Turks were very fired up about Islam. You say, well, I'm sure they were very deferential to the Arabs. Not so much. As far as they were concerned, when they had the opportunity, they made the Arabs subservient to them. However, with the Byzantines, it was a policy on the part of the Turks to conquer and push, which way? West. Because they wanted to conquer more and more. In short, what we called, or have called, the Eastern Roman Empire, a.k.a. Byzantine Empire, is finding its lands taken by the Turks. And you say, gosh, do we always talk about these people? It seems like it's somewhere on the news every night, something about this area of the world. Syria, I mean, yeah, it's one this, that, and the other. But that is interesting, isn't it, that this is in great significance in this particular period. The period is 11th century end of, and the 12th century, with which we are primarily concerned here. These Byzantines, but you can call them Orthodox, have been sending little SOS notes to the Pope. And you say, well, gosh, he ain't heavy, he's my brother. Aren't they all? all Christians, and I want you to have a big hug. I just love you to death. Not so much, because you know what you are? A loser. Yeah. You know why you're a loser? Because you're not following me. I am not just any old bishop. I am the bishop, and don't you forget it. This whole idea of will the real Pope please stand up is a terrible issue, and the 1054 is another one of those years you want to drop at a history party. Because, and people will all say, oh yeah, I wish Judith were here. She would have so much to say about some of these dates. Yeah, she'll be back next week, and then we'll drill on some of the major dates. I know she won't forget any of this. 1054 is, in fact, the date when the Pope will sort of leave a message for the rulers in Constantinople. He'll leave it on the altar of Hagia Sophia and say, in effect, we're not going to have any contact anymore because you were disobedient. You say, well, it could have been harsher. He didn't say, damn you, or you're already in hell. It's just a matter of days before you'll arrive. He could have said some uglier things. The point being that 1054 has basically been a standard between Catholics and Orthodox to this day, in the sense of looking for a date to say, when did we really go wrong? I mean, and that's how did our love fail? That sort of thing. But, hey, when you got the Turks coming at you, any port in a storm. So they send little notes to Rome and to the Pope and say, in effect, we just hate all this unfortunate relationship, but deep inside, I know you love me and I love you too. And Latin to Greek, Greek to Latin. That's the sort of thing that's going on here. To me, it's pretty political. I don't think it could happen as early as Gregory VII. I just don't think he has time. It's like he's got a lot on his plate. He's fighting Henry IV. He's trying to help the Normans, as in Norman conquest. There's a lot going on. His reign, in case you've forgotten it, I'm sure you haven't, 1073 to 1085. And the popes, right after Gregory VII, you know what they're going to do? Probably said this in their inaugural addresses. They said, we stand for carrying forth on the program of Gregory VII, that kind of thing. He was the inspiration. He was their ideal. To heck with those Germans. And let's help those Byzantines and stop those Turks. S-T-O-P, Turks. That's the deal. It's very, very important in that connection. If the Turks had suddenly become Christian, we would have to rethink our strategy, but that's probably not going to happen. So we understand why this is going to be so important. Now there's the question of who's going to go, because the First Crusade is without any king. It will consist of many major nobles, younger sons, brothers, those kind of individuals who have military wherewithal but don't have a lot holding them back. And believe it or not, and you'll believe it, the church folks, Pope on down, will encourage them to go. It's a good, wholesome extracurricular activity. It's something you can do. And you know what? In our program of pacifying the West, as in pacifying, making peace, the more you send these folks out to then the quieter things are going to be here. And we love the church as the instrument of peace. So what's better to go out for, I hate to put it this way, legitimate violence? In other words, you all are doing a good deed. Whereas if you stay here, you'll try to hurt each other. Yeah, we don't want that. It's like, they did this constantly. They had, the church had instituted policies such as the peace of God and the truths of God. The truths of God being a limiting of days you could go out and fight and beat up on folks. And the truths of God would be like, folks like us would have big signs that say, do not attack. You know, leave us out of this. That one looks like your size. Why don't you go up there? But we would be church people or whatever, or we would be I'm a peasant. I'm into agriculture, man. I'm not into fighting. So I'm on the way to the market, or I'm stopping off and leaving some crops here. Whatever, and you go on, you know, charging on your merry way. The fact is, though, that by diverting this population as it could, and we understand this from the First Crusade, the church hoped to increase peace. It doesn't mean that there won't be wars, but the wars they hope will be wars on behalf of law and order. Know that phrase? Law and order, we remember it. And we understand that that was very important in the growing and prospering medieval West. And this is the way the Pope and the church as a whole thought it could do it, by diverting these people. And of course, as Frank pointed out, the men themselves looked for adventure in a world many knew little about. We'll talk about that later. And also, of course, the opportunity for having their own kingdoms, maybe. They didn't know exactly what was going to be there. There wasn't a travel agent, you know, spread out the brochures and say, well, you get to that land of milk and honey. Now, let me show you some of the photographs of what you're going to find. You know, like the military recruits might pull on you. Well, in this case, I'm not sure. They just had this sweeping idea and caught up in this religious zeal, shall we call it. Many did sign up. And, of course, finally, what I've been talking about, this desire for law and order. And believe me, they needed it. Because when we understand that as these areas, Normandy on, are trying to develop some system of authority and controls, well, that's why the church had the peace of God as a way of, they would excommunicate people, and you say, oh, those knights must have fallen apart after their excommunication. They probably went to the priest and got down and cried. I wonder about that. Not to be cynical, but I'm thinking some of them may not have taken the church's admonitions as the church wanted. So, but they did those things, excommunications and so forth, even trying to damn them. Yeah. So, yeah, sorry about that. But that and the knights seem to have recovered nicely and dealt with their pain, whatever psychological issues they had. They got back on the horse the next day. Love horses. So, there is the great battle. And I like it so that you can see, you see Constantinople, and there are the Turks. Massacre, it's called. The year's 1071. Gregory VII is dead in 1085. We're going to preach the First Crusade in 1095. I don't want to get too many dates, just the biggies. And the idea is to understand that the Byzantines at that battle are humiliated. The current emperor, the emperor at the time of the First Crusade, is actually going to be ruler because his predecessor had been captured, which is embarrassing. You know, you just don't want to be taken by the Turks. That's just not a good situation. No, you know, it's sort of like you won't be on the roll of the most distinguished Eastern Roman emperors, will you? So, the idea is that this whole area that you see there, you see where what we call Istanbul today, much of that is going to be taken by the Turks. So you can really understand then why they need some help. But no, they never say, it's interesting to me, I've never read that any of the Byzantine emperors ever say, I love you, Papa. Can I be Catholic? I have never seen that. There may exist some evidence of somebody who was that willing, but they needed help desperately, and so they were hoping that by, I would say, playing up to the Pope and the Western pilgrimages and the pilgrims, I should say, and their desire for security, all of that was going to bring them some Western support. And the reason we know so much about this is because of a very interesting work written by a Byzantine woman. And it really is an interesting work. Comes in Penguin. You could have it by tomorrow. Yeah. So, yeah. Think of Amazon. It's waiting for you. It's there. And this is, her name was Anna. And she wrote an account of her father, Alexis, and what I would say were his interesting experiences as Byzantine emperor after the Turks took what I would say is a significant part of what we would call Turkey today. That is, of course, very important for the future because this is the individual who will hang in trying to get this support while Gregory VII and Henry IV are struggling, German king versus Pope. But they're waiting till the time that presumably the Pope will be able to help them. And again, I've never read that any of these Byzantine emperors, Alexis in particular, ever agreed to submit to papal authority, or that the ecclesiastical head of the church, the Patriarch of Constantinople, said, sure, I want to get down and kiss his ring. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, no, I'm thinking that would have been really hard. Maybe a nice handshake, or maybe a hug. Hugs are good. But I'm not thinking this is what we want. And do you know, I don't know if any of you all remember, but it's been the last few years, there have been visits between Catholic popes and Orthodox leaders. And Lord, that protocol, are they going to get up? Who's going to shake hands? Are we going to have... Yes, I mean, it's the biggest to do. So can you imagine how it would have been back then if today they can't seem to handle these steps? This is the book, Penguin. Yeah. Discounted version. Yeah.
Be here tomorrow.
Yeah. free postage.
That's right.
If you're a member, and I imagine we all are, let's face it. There it is. It's called the Alexiad because it is her father's story, and like any good daughter, but it is not unbiased. So it does tell the story from his perspective. And again, we all can appreciate, I think, that he is caught between a series of unfortunate circumstances. He was not the strongest or the greatest of rulers in any event. I mean, the day of Justinian is long past, many hundreds of years. The great days of the Byzantine Empire are long past. And that year beckons to us, especially people who love dates. And she's not here for her to call it out to us. And if she were here, I know I would hear her say, 1453. Yes, exactly. I knew it. I knew it. That just gets everybody stirred up. But it's like, we have these years that are so special to us. It's like, for sentimental reasons, of course. But in case of the fall of Constantinople, it's coming to a classroom near you, believe me. But we're not there yet. But right now, it is in serious trouble. So, now, the request of the Byzantines for help, that will come. They have come before to Gregory and other people. And I guess, you know, they said, like many of us right back, we're going to get to it. We put you down on the agenda, and, you know, and all of that. When folks ask for money or support, we say, we'll work on it. We've got a committee studying it. Oh, I love that. Yeah, we have a special Byzantine committee that's working on all your requests. So, yeah, and you say, let me pass that on to the Turks and ask them if they would mind postponing their visit. You know, it's one of these ASAP things. We need to move. We've got this agenda, push them back, way back, you know, on the Turks. So we got things to do. So all of this is to say that Gregory VII dies in 1085, and his admiring successors, because his successors are members of the College of Cardinals, who are, what shall I call them? Gregoryites. They love him, and they're wannabes. I mean, wow, he was the Pope. You know, sort of like they would have little Gregory VII posters on their papal rooms and say, yeah, we're going to be like that. We're going to be a super Pope. And, yeah, well, you betcha. And here they are, or here he is, right up there. He was Urban II. And again, Urban II. Pope Urban II was, in fact, French, and he was very anti-Henry IV, very devoted to Gregory VII and his memory. Didn't want revenge. That's wrong. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's ironic to say, but he did not want revenge. He wanted justice. Yeah, justice against those blankety-blank Germans. Because he hadn't forgotten what Henry IV did to our beloved Gregory VII. Because that's been bad. The Council of Clermont, and you're aware, of course, that we're not meeting in Germany or Italy. I think it's kind of interesting where we're meeting, because the Pope himself was French, which would help and understand why he chose that place. But it's also probably true that the kings of France had the strongest affection among Western rulers for the Pope. So, at the famous Council of Clermont, laymen and clergy together met for what was almost, I hate to use this term, but I will, sort of a Catholic revival. Not to say that the Supreme Pontiff was some sort of Elmer Gantry. I am not insinuating that, but it was true that if the group was chosen, I don't know if the lay and clerical guests at this overflow crowd at Clermont were chosen, or he just had a great sermon that time. For whatever reason, they were really titillated, very excited there in 1095. Many of you know that they screamed, Deus vult, God wills it. Go east, young man. Yes. And all the reasons. Go to the land flowing with milk and honey. They said, have you ever been to the Middle East? No, that would have been rude. But, you know, it's all metaphorically, right? But yes, they were getting all these folks very excited, and I wonder, sometimes I think, I wonder if Urban II would like it to be known, you know, that if you went out tonight, wherever you're hanging out tonight, you're in some big crowd, who would know about Urban II, would want to talk about him, you know, ask me about Urban, that kind of thing. That's what, I mean, you know, this has got to be his greatest hit, you know, being the Pope who launched the First Crusade. At least he launched it metaphorically. I mean, he didn't literally launch it. I mean, not everybody said, let's go, Holy Land or bust. I mean, it isn't that fast because we just can't leave yet. We have things to do, people to see, provisions to get. So it will, in fact, take several years. But we have it planted. Unfortunately, what the Byzantines intended and what the Pope wanted were not exactly in sync. And so that is going to create certain misunderstandings, shall we say. So, they go home, the nobles and the knights, and many of you know the story of Walter the Penniless and Peter the Hermit and others who began a kind of peasant pre-crusade. And they are shipped from Byzantine areas. They're Westerners who are very excited, and they don't have any preparations to make because they don't have anything, except they're very excited. They're anti-Catholic, anti-Semitic, and these mobs, if we want to use that term, are eliminated because the Byzantines simply shipped them east. Because they said, we're delighted to provide you with safe conduct, and here's a little Byzantine farewell. And, well, not farewell, but see you soon, and go get them. Down with Turks. And they go, yeah. And so that's the end of that. The fanaticism, of course, is a clear indication of what's to come. As if any of us had any doubt. We understand that this sort of desire to fight on behalf of the faith is going to encompass hatred of both Jews and Muslims, and a little for the Orthodox as well, so we'll throw it in for them too. In any event, the Byzantine emperor is not exactly pleased with his new buddies, his Frankish buddies. And they are all called Franks, by the way. I guess he gets them confused. You got these and those, they're all Franks. And when you read the sources for the Crusades, it's always interesting when you read Eastern they will always just call them the Franks. They know they're Catholic and they love their Latin, as do we. And so we all understand then that they are not, yes, they're fellow Christians, but no, we don't trust them and we really don't like them. But they're going to fight Turks. So that's one good thing about them. One of the most famous of the people who go on this crusade in 1099, as it will be finally begun in 1099, is Robert Shorthose, as he was known. Yeah, Shorthose. Because he just had little anklets, yeah. So, his father was William the Conqueror, but as those of you who had the British history will recall, he was considered so unworthy by his father that he wasn't even given the Kingdom of Italy. By primogeniture, he had to give him the Duchy of Normandy. And he would end up as his brother's prisoner when he got home. That isn't a nice thing to do to a crusader, is it? I mean, that's not part of your veteran's benefit package, but that's what it, but again, he is a perfect example, folks, this idea of Robert, he's not King of England, he's Duke of Normandy, he has a lot of resources, he's wants something to do, a project, and if he'd stayed home and done what he's supposed to do and worked, maybe the British nobility, maybe he could have conquered England, but no, he has to go off on this. We all know people like that. They just are not focused. So there you go, and he ends up making license plates for his brother. Yes, that is not a very, very good situation. The taking and coming on down of the Westerners will be an amazing conquest, and one the Byzantines really don't understand, because this was not part of their plan, or we would say plan A. This is plan C or D. They were not going to Jerusalem in the Pope's mind, or rather in the Emperor's mind. But the Pope, who really hadn't planned on this, he just thought, you just talk to everybody and make sure that pilgrims are welcome pilgrims, that kind of thing. But instead, these folks say, we're going to take it all. So they get all the way south, involving the culmination, which is the conquest of Jerusalem, and one of the bloodiest and most horrible experiences in which large segments of the population of Jerusalem are simply massacred. So this is not at all a pleasant story, but it's sort of the culmination of the First Crusade. They didn't take Constantinople, and I'm sure the Byzantines were just glad to send them south and get them out of their hair and let them cause problems for the Turks, which they certainly did. Because now these folks, not our friend from Anglo-Norman England that we talked about, Robert Shorthose, but other leaders of this First Crusade are going to say, you know what, let's just stay here. It's so beautiful. And back home, it's just fighting and all that and studying Latin. And here we can be and meet new friends of other cultures. And it really is an interesting situation. There are 4 major Crusader states. They're not going to last forever, believe me. But they will last And, of course, Latin will be spoken here. And they will be brought into feudal traditions. That's right. Feudal is spoken here. Yeah, we're going to have fiefs and vassals. It's Western heaven. And you say, you mean all these people are involved? Well, not so much. Most folks are going to be working. But the ruling people I'm talking about, it's going to be part of a Western world. And these are all these dark red territories. Edessa, and you know Antioch from the Bible, Tripoli, and see Damascus, finally Jerusalem. Those are the 4 areas Western Catholic. They have ties with the folks back home, I'm sure. And they would say, gosh, we really miss you all. Y'all gonna come for Christmas this year? You know, that kind of thing. But I'm not sure they want to come home, because now these conquerors have made these territories their own monarchies, their own areas to rule. So it's like a little bit of the West, if you want to view it that way, for the time until the Turks can pull it together and recover it. Now you will see the Byzantines all the way over here. You see those Fatimids down there? Again, that will be an Egyptian Muslim family who ruled Egypt. And then you see up there Seljuk Turks. So they haven't gone anywhere. They have just lost authority. And it's just interesting to me to see this. We can see what they couldn't. This is all ephemeral. For them, it's a great moment. They've got somebody teaching classes in feudal law at a Crusader university. And they have special papal prayers. And everybody, and carol, declensions, conjugations, paraphrastics. Yes, it is a little bit of heaven on earth for grammarians. I mean, they bring their culture with them, but as we would say today, of course, it's elitist, because they're not saying to their new Muslim friends, would you all like to come to confirmation class with us or something? No. They said, we're running it, and you all are losers. And so it's very much to be understood that way. The first king is, not surprisingly, a Frenchman. Again, he would never have been a king had he stayed home, Baldwin of Bologna. And you see his dates, early 12th century. He dies there. But his reign as king of Jerusalem will be, in fact, a very lengthy one, but in terms of how much power he will actually exert, I'm not so sure. But it's just important, I think, to understand that this is their way of imitating what was back home and what they are trying to create here, and how they will be treated by the people back west. Needless to say, neither Turks nor Byzantines had planned on any of this. These people were supposed to come and go, right? They were coming in, beating up on Turks, and then those Greeks were going to say, thanks, this has been real, have a nice trip home. But that's not what happened. These folks overstayed their welcome, if you ask me. Now, you see, they were all feudally bound, because this is what they knew. And, you know, a scholar once said to me, in terms of feudal practice, this is the only case of imposed feudal practices. In other words, in the West, in Western Europe, when feudal practices are applied, it sort of evolves. With this, somebody comes along with a how-to manual and said, now this is the way it's going to be. You're the vessel. I'm the suzerain. And your vessel, get down, because this is the way we do it. And then, yeah, and you have your text, and they'll tell you everything to do, you know, like a book. So it's a how-to manual of feudal practice, which I think is kind of interesting. Because these people are essentially like colonials. They are Western exports, and they come into this world flowing with milk and honey. Okay, now you're allowed to have some milk and honey yourself for 4 or 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay, 5 you said? Okay, if you say so. All right. Sad but true to understand that the history of these states, and we do have written sources for them, is not one that will be lengthy. In fact, the whole period of the so-called Crusader states is less than a century. However, during the same period, there are other aspects of what we'll call crusading enthusiasm, which is significant, such as the beginnings of the crusading monastic orders, with which some of you may be familiar. These were monastic orders, I suppose, in which individuals who were both religious and militaristic took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, which allowed them to become warriors, but at the same time carry out a variety of other functions on behalf of Catholicism, such as the hospitalers, who did what is clear, and others who were very good at something Ollie people all know, fundraising. They were very good at that. Some of you have heard of the Templars, who were very good at fundraising, great investment strategies, and knew how to work their markets. All of these monastic orders then were, in a sense, following monastic rules, but on the other hand, they followed it in a way that I think many would find very strange indeed, but that is the age in which they lived. When Jerusalem fell and word came to the West, there was, of course, the feeling among leaders of Catholicism that somehow we have gone wrong and God is punishing us. Among these was arguably the greatest Christian of the period, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. For those who know anything about monastic leaders and monasteries, this order of which he was a part, the Cistercians, was an effort of monks to live a simple life, and yet and they became great farmers and so forth, but at the same time go on with much of the monastic activities such as study and writing and teaching. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, not surprisingly among monastic leaders, was of the aristocratic sort, and an individual who was somewhat imperial. He could tell popes what to do. I mean, he really had that kind of charisma and authority. However, in this context, we're interested in the fact that he helped develop, I'll call it, the Second Crusade. And this was, like those after it, not successful. But it went on nonetheless, involving even kings this time. Among the people Louis VII and his then wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine. For those who are getting married but are also concerned about the fragility of their relationships, I would not advise going on a crusade for your honeymoon. This may not be Panama City or Pensacola, I don't know. Let's keep it low pitch, because this was not helpful for them. Nevertheless, over the years, people have tried to portray what it was like, and we will never know. I told another class, and some of you were in it, that actually rumors were around that Eleanor became involved with her uncle while she was on crusade. And you say, well, that's disgusting. Well, she never met him before. Okay? So, I mean, it's not like, it's not like some fellow at Thanksgiving. It's like he was Raymond, king of Antioch. He was a crusader king. So, I mean, I'm not defending incest, please. This isn't a debate society thing, okay? So we're not like incest, yay or nay. It's just there were rumors of that. Whatever the case, they, along with the Holy Roman Emperor, because the German emperor-pope fight was long over. So, Louis VII, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and you'll notice they are there with Louis' advisor, Suger, and the great Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. And I think it's interesting, and again, you see them in their various positions, and they're all standing to the Queen, around the Queen. They then, and again, this is not common. In fact, it's extremely uncommon for a woman to go on crusade. I mean, a queen. Regular women, perhaps, but not people who are not there for the purpose of fighting, yes. So, enough of that, but the fact is, it's all very interesting, but nothing happens as far as recovering Western fortunes. Now, if you had been a Western leader and said, what we want is simply safeguard for pilgrims, maybe they could have worked it out, but it took them a long time to reach that understanding because they really wanted it, to keep it. And the Kingdom of Jerusalem particularly. I suppose the Third Crusade, the so-called King's Crusade, is the best known simply because of all the miserable movies about Richard the Lionhearted. And I mean, how many can we name? Yeah, there's so many. There's so many celluloid horrors of movies that have, and all the cheesy medieval movies, just one after another. And I guess people didn't get tired of them. But again, the same question we ask, why does somebody want to go? Well, Richard, interestingly, had just become King of England. And he goes with his cousin, shall we call him, Philip II of France. And they go from the west. And some of you will remember they are to be joined by their German colleague, Frederick Barbarossa, who never makes it because he's drowned on the way. So that would seem a somewhat unfortunate incident of the crusade. But making it even more unfortunate is the fact that once they get there, and some of you heard the story, rumors are that Philip's heart is not really into it, and he leaves. He says, you know, this is really interesting what we're doing, you know, fighting Turks, it's great, but man, the workload I left at home, I need to get back. Paris is calling big time. So, wishing you all the best, and here's to Jerusalem. Seriously, Philip II ends up returning home to try to get Richard's lands in France with a relationship with Richard's kid brother John. Some would call him a sneak and a lowlife and other unfortunate terms. I'll just say that when Richard is gone. But the fact is that this new young king, who supposedly spent 6 months of a 10-year reign in England, which will show you that when he comes across as, in the movies, as this chipper English gentleman, I don't think he was very English. He didn't go there very often. He was there merely to raise funds, take up offerings. And all of this is to say that when he wasn't on this crusade, which went fairly well, there was between Richard and the famous Saladin, the great Muslim leader who was quite romantic, yes, and there was a respect between them. I would say that it is successful in the sense that pilgrims can make their journeys presumably without worries of security, and that's really all that Richard was concerned about. Unfortunately, as some of you will recall, Richard was captured by the Germans on the way home. Sneaky, and it's very rude to capture crusaders, too. So you're going to get a very, very bad notice in your folder for that. They'll say, capturing a crusader, you know what that is? That's just bad. Because, and you say, why would you capture people? They love those ransoms. They really, really did. You say, so they don't kill them. No, what do you don't do any good dead. You're very good, though, being alive and held for ransom. His mother, the mothers, she paid the ransom, Eleanor of Aquitaine. So that's a great story of Richard III. Has the passion of the crusading gone downhill? I don't know, but I think it's changing. It's evolving over time. I think people still expect to go on crusade. I mean, I think when little folks are growing up, they say, well, what do you want to do when you're a big boy? Maybe go on crusade. You know, that sort of thing, if you are going to be a king or a great lord. That is why this crusade, the so-called Fourth Crusade, is so, what's that word, problematic. A funny thing happened on the way to Jerusalem. We got caught up in some other activities. And that just shows you, if you are taking out loans, borrowing money, be very careful which bank you go to. Because that's a word of advice that comes from the Fourth Crusade. These crusaders who were there under the aegis, well, the preacher was someone that I have great interest in. And I'll just say those years, and I'll watch the twinkle in your eye. 1198 to 1216, and you'll think, oh my gosh, yes, that's right, Innocent III. Innocent III. Much will be said about him in the next 2 weeks. You just wait. I know it's hard to imagine the excitement that you're feeling about the next 2 weeks. But enough of that. He did have interest in trying again to deal with this Middle Eastern area and get Jerusalem. I mean, this has been going on a long time. He becomes Pope in 1198, age 37. And, you know, at 37, you have a lot to get up and go. And part of what he wanted to do was to complete the Crusades in an expeditious manner. Unfortunately, the crusade was diverted by the interests of people from Venice. Now, Venice is a nice city, and you tourists, I encourage you to visit it, hang out in, yes, thank you, Jan, hang out at St. Mark's Cathedral. The little birds that will want to visit with you. Just be careful. On and on and on. I'm working for the Venetian Chamber of Commerce part-time. But they're also known for being somewhat devious in their practices. They were major trading partners with Byzantines. And their leaders, the famous Doge, was in fact more than a little crafty. He loved his ducats. I don't want to say he was avaricious, but if you say it, I won't disagree. And you say, you mean, wasn't he a Catholic? Yeah. I mean, yeah, he was definitely, but was he following church leadership in that matter? No. He was definitely this man, Enrico Dandolo, Doge of Venice, who sort of like the major Republican leader, was determined to use these forces for his own purposes. And how that worked was that in order to provide the Crusaders with the financing, the Venetians had them stop off on the city of Zaire on the coast, said, I need for you all to conquer it because they've been troubling and they're part of our economic expansion program. So, you know, that sort of thing. And they say, we will do it. And unfortunately, they did not stop there. The great historian of the Crusades, Stephen Runciman, a name that will ring bells for many of you who've studied the Crusades, will say that this is one of the greatest acts of atrocities in world history. And do you know something really funny? This morning, I was listening to a book on the looting of Peking during the Boxer Rebellion. And they were saying that these two are like top two in history of looting and pillaging. And I thought, how amazing that I should be reading about one and talking about the other on the same day, because you think about they're separated by many centuries. But that is probably true when you think about it. The Peking ruins and the Constantinople ruins. I was so glad I found my faithful Delacroix. He is there. He's there when I need him. And I got to thinking, I wonder why Delacroix was so interested in this. And what I suspect is that, as some of you know, during his lifetime, the Greeks gained their independence from the Turks. It was the formation of modern Greece in the 19th century, and it was quite the cause for the literati of the West. You know, they were all like, go Greek, you know, this kind of great cause of freedom for the Greeks. And I wonder, and you look at the various individuals, and here come the knights for this terrible looting. The stories, and we do have a Western chronicler of this Fourth Crusade who describes how they use a woman who becomes, they take her, put her in the cathedral there in Constantinople and sort of make her the queen. And on and on and on, these Western troops take over Constantinople and pillage, rape, and just a terrible, terrible situation. And that, of course, will be the last of the four Crusades. Interestingly, the Pope will have what I would consider mixed reactions. Now, if you were Pope and you got word of what these folks did in Constantinople, you would be, I think, dismayed. You would not say, well, go guys, yeah, kill them, destroy it. No, you're not supposed to be doing that. Besides, you were only supposed to have a little stopover in Constantinople and go south. You were supposed to be on the way to Jerusalem. What the heck? Because they're like setting up. And then, you know, he goes, well, maybe this is all going to work out better than I thought. Because you see, what's going to happen is after the unpleasantness of the attacks on Constantinople, there's going to be sort of a regrouping. And people that I would call Latin leaders are going to say, we need to get some kind of functioning government here. Can we do that? Does everybody here know Latin? And they'll all raise their hands. They'll say, oh, really? Well, I guess then we don't need Greeks. And they'll say, yeah. And so, you know what they're going to do? Set up a Latin government in Constantinople. And there will be a Latin Archbishop of Constantinople. And you're going to say, that's bonus aum, Carol. Good, good. We like it. And it's all in Latin. You say, oh, music to my ears. That is the problem that Innocent is going to deal with. They had been excommunicated, the Crusaders. And he will lift it because he said, God reveals his plans sometimes in long ways, and we miss it at first. And now, this is a few years later, he said, now what is that old song? I can see clearly now. So it's like Innocent can now see the divine will. And what God really wanted was for Constantinople to become an obedient city.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sister. In other words, we don't want those, you know what, Greeks being sassy. They are supposed to get down and do what the Pope says. And so, for a time, there will be a Latin church and emperor in Constantinople. Now, that doesn't last. It's kind of sort of like another old song, these precious moments we will have. And you can imagine, I mean, when Innocent has this great, great meeting called the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, and for those of you who are interested in papal history, oh, there were some great times when they could talk about the seven sacraments and the duties of priest. Oh, yeah, it was very titillating, day in, day out of those sessions. And when that was going on, I was saying, innocent would look around the room at the different cardinals and all of that. And then he said, "Hi, Byzantine buddy," because that was the head of the church in Constantinople. "May I kiss your ring, please?" "Yes, you can." And you can do it in Latin. And you're saying, this is a dream come true. In other words, folks, seriously, this is going, in a sense, to help the Pope become more positive, even though he was saddened by the destruction that went on during the takeover of Constantinople. Now, clearly the Fourth Crusade was not a success in the classic sense of the word. And this only means that when the Greeks do recover Constantinople, it helps shorten, shall we say, the remaining life the Byzantine Empire will have. Because remember that year, and don't forget it, 1453. Because that's the year you say, gosh, but even then they didn't have a lot. No, they didn't. The Turks are moving on and taking more. Otherwise, it is simply to note that kings will continue. I remember, and you will just love this, some of you, Henry VIII even talked about going on crusade. And you say, gosh, the 16th century? Yes. It's still like something like, in your inaugural address. My plans, I want to go on a crusade. Everybody cheer, and all that. So, yeah. So that idea of crusade will continue on. To say, nah, I'm not into that, man. That's just not good. Let's just have an ecumenical council, or have meetings with Muslims and work out. No. We still have I got that spirit. I want to do it. And they say, let's put that on I don't want to say back burner, but let's put it on a to-do list. And we'll get next year, mañana, all the rest of the procrastination and delaying. And essentially, there will be no major crusades. There will be minor crusades that I do not want to deign with a number. But I will know St. Louis went on one. Edward I of England went on one. Many crusades, if you will. Frederick II, don't you put him in hell? He went on one just to hang out with the Turks. But the idea of the crusade, I must say, had lost that great feeling of excitement. I think one of the most ironic occurrences occurred in 1451. A man named Pius, the papal name was Pius II, and he was excited. You may have heard the story of how he had preached it, and he came out, he wanted them to leave, but he died, and they never really got it together. I guess financing fell through, and so the fleet never sailed, but he died anyway. And that was like mid-15th century, and so you think, to end this with another popular song of the past, they'd lost that love and feeling. And I know. But Pius II, he went to his reward believing the Crusaders are coming, and that was that. Now, there are other ways of dealing with troublemakers, and next week, of course, will be dedicated to them, heretics and the Inquisition. So please come back. There will be more dates to learn, too. And Judith will be here. Thank you. Thank you very much.